I'm Allison Hall, and you're watching Law and Crime.
And welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody. Michael Bryant here. Hey, if you just missed the interview with Mark Eiglarsh, the attorney for Scott Peterson, just acquitted, you can check that out. We'll have that clipped in on the YouTube channel before you know it. Right now, though, we're continuing to cover the murder trial of Mr. Melly in Broward. Dark today, dark all next week because of the holiday. We're going to continue to kind of bring you up to speed on where we are in this case as the prosecution really continues to bring their case to that crescendo that you might expect. This is one of the key witnesses. Everybody talking about it has said, well, if the prosecution's case has been a little flat up to date, yesterday pretty good. This is the case, of course, as you know, Demons accused of killing his two friends, Christopher Thomas Jr. And also Anthony Williams. They're rappers together. They're leaving a recording session. Somehow, this shooting takes place. The defendants claim, the defendant here in this case claims it was a drive-by. I would imagine when Cortlen Henry is tried in October, we're going to hear a similar defense. They're certainly going to be united, I think, in that defense. So some of the evidence from yesterday cleared up the huge question in this case, at least from the prosecution standpoint. They had a reconstructionist on to talk about the shots being fired. Where were they fired from? Inside the car or outside the car, a la a drive-by type shooting. So let's go in and look at some of the direct examination from this expert. He's the guy that says this shooting, man, it took place inside the vehicle. Let's watch.
How can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of this jury that, for example, shot that was marked as H in the here, let's go to 6755. How can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury that shot H is not the one that wound up in the face of Mr. Thomas?
Because Mr. Thomas is already crumpling at this point, and he is actually he's in the clear, if you will, of site H.
How can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury that site H is not the shot to the back of the head of Anthony Williams?
Because site H continues and strikes Anthony Williams in the shoulder.
In terms of site K, the one that goes completely across the car, how can you tell that no one was sitting in the rear driver's side seat when that bullet came through the car?
It would have hit their legs.
Was there any sign of blood or anything on that seat?
There were signs of blood on the seat, yes.
Just for the record, we are now 4875. What are we looking at in image 4875?
This is the driver's side rear compartment area with the driver's side rear passenger door in the open position.
Okay. So going forward to the next image, which is 4876, what are we looking at here?
You see that there's a reaction to blood on the door.
And so what does that tell you as a shooting reconstructionist?
It tells me that the door was closed during the shooting incident inside the vehicle.
And again, 4877.
This is the same thing.
So, Sergeant Williams, in terms of the stippling and powder tattooing that was present on Mr. Thomas, would you give a range as to how far away a muzzle would have been from his face?
The range that I would give to that would be 8 to 12 inches.
And without the actual firearm that caused that wound, could you do a recreation?
I could not, but again, like I said earlier, this is a unique case where our shooting is confined to a known area with known confinement measurements, and it can be deduced.
Sergeant Christopher Williams, doing really one heck of a job as a reconstructionist for the prosecution. And after maybe a slow start, maybe even a slow middle, prosecution seems to be finishing quite a bit stronger than the process began. Hey, I've got some great guests here with me. Former FBI agent Bobby Chacon's here, trial attorney Katherine Lizardo as well. Both here to talk about this case and where we are at this moment. Katherine, I can't say that you were poo-pooing the prosecution's case, because you would never do that. I probably have done that. But what do you think about this latest turn in their case? Not just the reconstructionists, but the medical examiners as well. What do you think?
Well, they are turning it up a notch, like you mentioned, and it does remind me of the Alex Murdaugh trial that we recently covered, where we felt that there was not much evidence being shown that Murdaugh committed the murder, but the prosecution ended with a bang with a lot of the other witnesses they have. It seems that's the similar strategy that the prosecution is doing here. There were a lot of doubts at the beginning as to was he the shooter? Was Jamell Demons the shooter? And how are they going to prove that? This testimony, riveting testimony by the reconstructionist, is very helpful for the jury because it's very visual and they can connect the dots finally. And that's what a reconstructionist expert usually does. That's why they're very vital at trial.
Of course, and I really think you did do a good job. And I want you to stand by here, Bobby, because I want to take a look at the cross-examination. Obviously, they're attempting to put the credibility of this expert, in jeopardy. And let's look at some of that cross-examination. We'll talk on the other side.
Their analysis here wasn't dealing with just trigonometry and common courtesy, that's being rude, but also your psychology of what that person would have done.
Not necessarily. So for this particular demonstrative, that is my answer. If you have somebody being rude and pointing a gun across you, I would say that it's human nature to hold it. You want to protect yourself. You would want to make sure that nobody gets hurt. But that didn't happen, and we don't have any blood directionality coming this way. So this scenario, although it was hoisted, is not possible.
I just want to be clear. The reason that's not possible is two reasons. One, the shooter would be being discourteous by pressing up against the person in the rear driver's seat, assuming somebody was there, rear driver's side seat. And two, because you are assuming that that person would have grabbed the arm and therefore it couldn't have happened that way. That is your science that makes this shot, not what happened.
And what you're forgetting to mention is the blowback that's on the headliner. That would be part of this shooting incident, which you would not, which I testified on direct that you would not have the blowback on the headliner if you had someone outside the car shooting Anthony Williams and shooting Christopher Thomas. So therefore, you added rudeness, so I disagree. I agree it's rude to hold somebody up against their car like that. But at the end of the day, it's not possible, based on the blood evidence and the trajectories of this, that somebody was outside of this vehicle shooting into the vehicle.
At the end of the day, it's just not possible. It didn't happen that way.
Correct.
Okay. And I just need this jury to be clear on why, at the end of the day, the shooter was not outside.
Because we don't have the blood evidence and the trajectory.
Always gets kind of nervous when your expert says it's impossible. It is just impossible, unless it's a question like, can people fly without a plane? But in this case, this defense attorney is getting the expert to do just that. Bobby Chacon's here, Katherine Lizardo. Bobby, what do you think about that? I understand, he wants to pin him down to make it look like, well, if you just dismiss it as totally impossible, it does affect his credibility. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it does. I've been in that situation. I've been cross-examined by very good and competent and aggressive defense attorneys. And it is a good idea, and it's probably prudent to stay away from very definitive statements. You know, in cases like this, and a lot of forensic work, and I did 19 years of forensic work, there is science, and then there's the conclusions we make based on the science. And I think that's what the defense counsel here is trying to get at. Like, there are certain scientific things he can say. And then, based on that, you make certain kind of conclusions that must have happened because this is what the science is pointing to. And sometimes that's a short hop, and sometimes that's a bigger leap. And so the defense wants to get at, like, okay, there's science here, but your conclusions are a bit of a stretch from that science. And that's the case in almost all, you know, forensic work. And, you know, like we often hear, oh, the victim had defensive wounds, you know, because we assume when someone's come at you with a knife, you put your arm up. We don't know for a fact that those are defensive wounds. We call them that because there's a natural conclusion that when someone's coming at you with a knife, you put your hands up to protect yourself. That's a bit of a hop from the science of the medical examiner saying, here are the wounds. And then your conclusion is those are defensive wounds. So that's what's going on here. They're trying to make that hop more of a leap and undermine this expert's conclusions about what the science means.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that they brought into the mix the rudeness of reaching across somebody to shoot somebody else with a gun. I'm not so sure if you're involved in a drive-by that politeness is top list of you know, things you want to make sure you carry out. You know, if you're trying to kill somebody, you're going to nudge them. You know, that's not a deal. Okay, let's take a break here. We're going to have the MEs coming up in just a moment here. This is critical stuff too, because remember, some of these bullets, the MEs say, entered the bodies of the victims after they were already dead. So how does that work? We're going to get to that testimony when we come right back.